In June, I went out to the Hanford Site in Washington. It's often called the most contaminated place in the Western Hemisphere. It's also Umatilla, Yakima, Nez Perce, and Wanapum ancestral lands. This site was part of the secretive Manhattan Project during World War II and the Cold War. The world's first industrial-scale nuclear reactor, called the B reactor, still stands out here. The B reactor produced the plutonium that went into the bomb codenamed Fat Man, which the US dropped unnecessarily on Nagasaki. I signed up for a tour offered by the Department of Energy, wondering how close to the infamous B reactor we'd be able to get. It turns out they just let you wander around inside the reactor. Also, the tour is free and open to the public, so if you want to poke around inside a decommissioned nuclear reactor, you can. But that's not why I went to the Hanford site. I went because every year the Yakima Nation visits the site for a cultural event they call Hanford Journey. See, for thousands of years, this wasn't the Hanford site. It was a winter camp, a hunting and fishing site, and a place of Indigenous ceremony. Yakima folks still remember it that way, and they come out here every year to keep that memory alive. Hanford Journey is also a chance to help educate the youth about the generations-long cleanup effort. See, above the ground, the sagebrush steppe here is remarkably pristine and biodiverse because Americans can't build here anymore. But underground, the soil and the groundwater are poisoned with massive plumes of toxic chemicals and radioactive isotopes. Tribal nations are pushing government agencies, namely the Department of Energy, to let them help to inform and participate in cleanup efforts. But right now, they're only allowed to issue public comments on federal cleanup plans, and even that is more influence than they used to get. Yakima's cleanup efforts began with an elder named Russell Jim, who's no longer with us, but he founded the tribal nation's Environmental Restoration Waste Management Program, and he's a wonderful speaker. Here's Russell Jim in a 2003 interview with the Atomic Heritage Foundation.
We have attempted in our work to be of assistance to the Department of Energy and others to influence this cleanup. Our position is that we are neither pro-nuclear nor anti-nuclear. We are pro-safety for all people. We do not wish to assimilate to the mainstream of society. We can live side by side. We can utilize modern technology to help preserve and protect the culture of the Yakima. If this happened in the suburbs of New York or Cincinnati, it would have been cleaned up yesterday. And there are tremendous amounts of food out there, at least 70 different types, and equal amount of medicines that have sustained us for centuries.
And here he is 10 years later, speaking at the University of Washington in Seattle.
The Yakima Nation has nowhere to go. Our culture is in the ground, through the foods and medicine, out of the river. My DNA, my genes, have been eating the salmon and the foods and medicines out of the ground for millennia. When I turn to Burger King and Kentucky Fried, I get diabetes. And so we are consistently trying to determine how best to clean the site up.
Jim's cleanup efforts now extend into future generations. The Yakima Nation is sending youth to Los Alamos, New Mexico, another site in the Manhattan Project, to learn about their toxic inheritance. And every year they hire interns to work on tribal cleanup efforts. I spoke to one such intern, Josephine Buck, who's trying to ensure that federal cleanup activities respect and preserve important cultural sites. The Department of Energy's tour didn't mention any of this, but they did offer lots of crazy factoids about Hanford's nuclear facilities. The US built the experimental B reactor in 11 months, and it took 48,000 workers to do this. All those workers needed places to sleep and eat and gallivant in the off hours. For a time, Hanford was the largest US voting precinct with the world's biggest general delivery post office, and it took incredible amounts of crappy American food to keep these people fueled. Every day they went through 120,000 pounds of potatoes, 2,200 loaves of sandwich bread, 700 cases of Coca-Cola, 30,000 donuts, and 16,000 packs of cigarettes. Barracks, of course, were segregated, not formally, but de facto, and black life at Hanford is a whole other untold history that shaped the Tri-Cities area nearby. Also, the B reactor was built with no women's bathrooms, presumably because scientists are men. But guess what? When they fired up the reactor for the first time and it failed, it was the youngest scientist on staff, a woman, who figured out why. And according to our DOE tour guide, she did it with a slide rule. Her name was Leona Marshall Libby. To build the Hanford site, the US government first annexed 580 square miles and evicted 2 whole towns. These were non-native towns. I mean, white farming communities. Communities that kind of thing theoretically isn't supposed to happen to in America. The husks of some of these town buildings, like the old high school, are still standing out there. Now, the DOE's public tour that I went on, incidentally, it glossed over the racism, the sexism, the contamination, and the unnecessary violence of government operations here, focusing instead on the ingenuity of select white men. The tour guide described in detail the land dispossession as it impacted non-natives, but there was no mention of indigenous people. At least until one sentence at the very end on the bus ride back, and it was kind of under his breath. And that's why we're telling the story of the land before Hanford, because this isn't just a nuclear dumping ground. This land always has been and continues to be part of the people who come from it. You can read more about the Indigenous view of Hanford at hcn.org.